Hi, I'm Kat and today I have for you a true crime case, a word in Romanian, and I'll also be doing my makeup at the same time. But as you can see, I tried really hard to remove this eyeshadow from my previous video and it seems that it doesn't want to go away. So I'm hoping that I can cover it up with the base. Okay, so the word for today, actually the words, are părți ale corpului. Părți ale corpului. Părți ale corpului. Well done, guys, you just said body parts. Tara, a mother of two children, became nationally known as the victim of murder by her husband Stephen Grant in February 2007. Her case gained widespread coverage in Michigan and nationally, mainly due to her husband fleeing while the police were searching their house. Tara Lynn Grant, born on 28th of June 1972, was born and raised in Michigan, Macomb County, but after she graduated from college, she decided to move to Detroit. So she married her husband, Stephen Grant, even though they were completely opposites. Tara met Stephen while studying at the university. Because Tara loved art, Stephen actually proposed to her at the Detroit Institute of Art. Tara was ambitious, popular, smart, and she was also a perfectionist. On the other hand, Stephen never quite finished his studies. He worked in his father's machine shop part-time while Tara began a highly successful career. After graduating from Michigan State University with a bachelor's degree in business, Tara began working at Washington Group International as a consultant where her career actually skyrocketed. Washington Group International was an American corporation providing engineering, construction, and management services to businesses and governments all around the world. Tara and Stephen had two children, a girl and a boy. Lindsay was born in 2000 and Ian was born in 2003. Because Tara's career was so successful, Stephen became a stay-at-home dad, leaving Tara the only one bringing money in. Tara's career was really important to her, but so were her children. She would be gone on business trips during the week, but she would always be home on weekends with her family. And before leaving on her business trips, she would leave notes for the children to remind them of how much she loved them. Although Stephen was a stay-at-home dad, they also hired an au pair through an agency that sends foreign young women to work as live-in nannies in American homes. So in 2007, the au pair living with the family was a German young lady called Verena, who was only 19 years old. So far, I mean, it all sounds amazing, right? The thing is, Stephen was quite jealous and resentful of Tara's career and her constant traveling. They would often argue about how much time Tara would spend away from home. Stephen even said, quote, "I was a better mom than Tara was. There's no other way to put it. I was the mom of the house. She was gone all the time. If the kids needed someone to take them to swimming or school or soccer practice, I took them." End of quote. So what did Stephen do? He looked for attention from other women. On the night of Friday, February the 9th, 2007, Tara returned home from Puerto Rico where she was working during the week. After her return to her Macomb County home, she and Stephen actually had a fight. Tara was supposed to go back to Puerto Rico on Sunday because of an early morning business meeting on Monday. Stephen was fuming. He felt that Tara didn't spend enough time with the family. According to Stephen, they had a horrible fight and Tara left the home the same night. Stephen told police that his wife was on the phone with someone who picked her up in a dark car. By Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2007, Tara didn't show up to work or go back home. Stephen reported Tara missing to the Macomb County Sheriff's Office. After interviewing him, police found out that 5 days have passed between the time Stephen last saw Tara and when he notified the police of her disappearance. He told police that he tried to call her several times and left a lot of messages. Her family didn't know where she was either, and she also failed to show up to work. All of these things were very unlike Tara, and Stephen was, understandably concerned. The missing persons case was started by the Macomb County Sheriff's Office. Over the next 2 weeks, Stephen spoke to the media several times in press conferences, and he actually brought a lot of attention to Tara's case. But authorities didn't quite have the same impression of him. When the police first got to his house, he was very nervous, very fidgety. He was over-cooperative, and the more questions police started asking him, the more nervous he became. Detectives also became suspicious of the au pair, Verena. It was determined that Stephen and Verena started a sexual relationship around 4 to 6 weeks before Tara went missing. But Verena was out with friends on the night that Tara disappeared. Detectives also found suggestive emails that Stephen sent to one of his ex-girlfriends. But initially, police found no evidence in the home to suggest a struggle, foul play involved, or any sign of Tara whatsoever. Even though Stephen would continue his daily press conferences in the media, he stopped cooperating with police. Trying to find out what happened with Tara, police checked hospitals, morgues, airports for any indication of her whereabouts. As time went on, they started becoming more and more suspicious of Stephen. Police also searched a wooded area behind their home, but they found absolutely nothing. February was gone, and with no sign of Tara or any indication of what happened to her. In March, there was a major break in the case. Someone found a bag in the park close to Tara's home, the same wooded area which was already searched by the police. The bag had blood and metal shavings. Stephen worked part-time at the machine shop owned by his father. This was actually enough evidence for a search warrant of the home and also the machine shop. On March 2nd, 2007, police executed the search warrant on the Washington Township home. Stephen was there, but he asked if he could take the family dog for a walk. He was not under arrest, so he was allowed to leave. In the meantime, police found a tote in the family's garage that they didn't see when they initially searched the house. When they opened the tote, in it they found a plastic bag. On opening the plastic bag, blood seeped out from it. Inside the bag, police found the fully clothed torso of a woman. They had found Tara Grant. At the machine shop owned by Stephen's father, investigators found the mother lode of forensic evidence, including hair, blood, and even pieces of Tara's flesh. But at this point, they couldn't find Stephen Grant. Remember when he asked if he can leave to walk the dog? Well, he already knew what they are going to find in that tote. Stephen actually fled when he knew that the police were executing the search warrant. 2 days later, however, they were able to track him through cell phone tracking. He was found in the remote Wilderness State Park, hypothermic and barely alive. Stephen was airlifted to a Michigan hospital for treatment. He was found severely hypothermic with very little warm clothing despite the freezing temperatures. But he had also ingested large amounts of alcohol and prescription medication. I mean, this reminds me so much of Brian Laundrie. What do you think, guys? Stephen later told authorities that he planned to kill himself in the wilderness. But Stephen recovered and he confessed. According to Stephen, on February the 9th, 2007, Tara came home from Puerto Rico, but when she told him she had to leave again on Sunday, he became upset and they started arguing. Stephen suspected that Tara was having an affair with a co-worker and they argued about that as well. He said that Tara slapped him at one point and that was when things actually escalated. He hit her back and then she fell. Stephen told detectives, quote, "I know that she banged her head on the floor And then she said something like, "That's it, I'm gonna take the kids. You're going to be effing homeless. You're a piece of shit." End of quote. He said that at that point he just snapped. He strangled Tara for approximately 4 minutes. She grabbed his hand at one point, but it was too late because he just couldn't stop. He knew he was going to prison, and so he panicked. Stephen then wrapped his belt around Tara's neck, using it to pull her down the stairs whilst their children slept in their bedrooms. Now I need to remind you that at the time the children were 4 and 6 years old. So Stephen placed Tara in the back of his SUV, and that's when Verena, the au pair, returned home. So he told Verena that Tara left after their argument. She had nothing to do with the murder. Stephen then began his cover-up. He called Tara's phone several times and left messages. At the same time, he continued his sexual relationship with Verena. The next day, he sneaked out of the house and he took Tara's body to his father's machine shop, where he dismembered her. He took her body piece by piece in a plastic tub on his children's sled and went to the wooded area behind his house, but then something happened. What I'm going to tell you next, guys, is something out of a movie. Really, you would never believe that this happened in real life. Anyway, that's what Stephen says happened, right? He said that when he took Tara's body on the sled took off and he was chasing after it. The sled went down the hill and he finally managed to get it stopped, but then the sled fell over and broke. So all of the dismembered parts of Sarah's body fell all over the place. This is what he told detectives during his confession. Now I don't know if it's something you can believe. Stephen then collected the body parts and buried them in several places in the woods. He hoped that the wildlife would find her body before anyone else did. He moved parts of her quite a few times to avoid detection. When he found out that the police were planning to search the area, he took the torso back to his garage, scared that the police would find it. The reason why he did that was because he didn't really expect the police to execute a search warrant on his home. Once they executed the warrant, Stephen knew that they would find Tara's torso in the garage, so he took the opportunity to flee, to run away. He drove around Michigan, drinking and taking medication before going to the Wilderness State Park. His plan was to die there, that's why he didn't wear protective clothing, but he was rescued just in time to be held accountable for Tara's murder. On Friday, December 21st, 2007, Stephen was found guilty of murder in the second degree. The prosecution went after first-degree murder charges, but after 3 weeks of testimony, the jury couldn't reach a unanimous decision in premeditation of the crime. The judge in the case called Stephen Grant's actions demonic, barbaric, and dishonest. He was sentenced to 50 to 80 years in prison for the second-degree murder charge, with an additional of 6 to 10 years for mutilation of the corpse, with the sentences to run concurrently, which really means at the same time. He appealed the decision in state court, filed on March 30, 2010, but he was unsuccessful. The Michigan Supreme Court reviewed the case and affirmed the lower court's decision, stating that Stephen's trial was not unduly influenced by pre-trial publicity. Additionally, the court ruled that Stephen Grant was not denied access to an attorney before confessing to the police. So I assume that those were his grounds for appeal. Stephen was jealous of his wife's success, which led him to murder Tara and dismember her body. Stephen, who was only 37 years old at the time of Tara's murder, will not be eligible for parole until he's 87. It seems that Stephen didn't have any criminal record before the murder of his wife. In June of 2008, Stephen Grant's father actually killed himself. It's speculated that he was unable to overcome the shame and destruction that the murder caused his family. Tara's family expressed their intention to allow her 2 children to read their father's confession once they are adults. They believed in giving the children access to the truth when they are old enough to understand and process it. To represent Tara's estate, the court authorized her sister Alicia Standerfer, who filed a wrongful death civil lawsuit against Stephen Grant in pursuit of justice. Alicia and her husband, Eric, took on the responsibility of raising the two young children in their home in Ohio. Verena Dirks, the 19-year-old au pair teenager, working as a nanny for the Grants, spoke with the detectives investigating the case after Tara went missing. At the time, she didn't tell them about her affair with Stephen because she was scared of the potential consequences it could have on both herself and Stephen. Verena actually, had feelings for him, and she really believed in his explanations, leading her to want to protect him at all costs. I think that, it's kind of understandable. She was naive, she was, only 19 years old, she was still a kid. So it would be so easy for her to be convinced by a man like Stephen. Verena, after being asked by her employer to leave the household, she actually left. It's possible that the agency got wind of the news and they wanted to get her out of there. On February 21st, she went back home to Germany, but she was still in secret contact with Stephen. Their communication ended after he called her on 3rd of March to confess. That's when Verena decided to cut all ties with him. When Tara was murdered, like I said, her children were just 4 and 6 years old. Their lives were turned upside down in a second. After their mother was murdered by their father, a custody battle began. It was Tara's sister, Alicia, and her husband who actually gained custody, but also the responsibility of working to help them deal with such a devastating loss. The family and friends of Tara Grant carry on organizing and participating in Tara's Run, a 5K which raises money to fight domestic violence. Tara's children, Ian and Lindsay, go back every year to Makeup County for Tara's walk. It's an opportunity for them to remember their mom and to help raise awareness about domestic abuse. Lindsay said that she advocates therapy to anyone that she meets. She said she is the person that she is today thanks to the work that she did with psychologists. Lindsay Standerfer is now 23 years old. She's a student at the Ohio State University. Her focus is on the future, but it's also a reminder of her past as she studies pediatric psychology. She wanted to get into psychology to work with kids. She wants to help children who have dealt with traumatic events in their lives, especially since she completely understands the pain. She still has memories of that time. She doesn't want to speak with her biological father, Stephen Grant. She doesn't believe she will ever need to. For a long time, she felt the need to speak with him for some kind of closure, but she created her own closure. Ian Standerfer is now a college freshman in Wisconsin. At 21 years old, he said that if he could change just one person's life, it would make everything worthwhile. Being only 4 years old when his mom died, he doesn't really remember much, just, bits and pieces. He doesn't have any contact with Stephen either. He just doesn't want it. Both Lindsay and Ian turned the tragedy into an opportunity to help others. They spread the word to try and end domestic violence, and Ian believes that the biggest issue that happens around domestic violence is that people are afraid to leave. Lizzie said that just knowing that no one is going to judge you, that everyone is going to be there for you, to love and support you, and that you have help if you need it, makes a difference. Their hope is that by sharing Tara's story and highlighting the local resources available, it won't happen to others.
All of your registrations will go to the Tara Grant Liberation Fund, and that fund helps survivors meet those unexpected financial burdens when they're trying to leave. So this is critical. This is critical. So when you walk today, know that you're walking to raise awareness and you are walking to help a family. Thank you.
By definition, domestic violence is a pattern of abusive behavior in a relationship where one person tries to gain control behavior can be physical, where there's bruises and broken bones that are left behind, or it can be emotional, where nobody ever sees those scars that you have. Because as we know, domestic violence just doesn't affect just that person. There's a trickle-down effect. My sister Tara, I'm going to try and get through this without crying. She was 34 and a half years old at the time, had been married for 10 years, had 2 beautiful children who are now standing right behind me, Lindsay and Ian, and she had a booming career. For anyone who didn't know Tara, you would assume that she had a perfect life. Well, most people, including those closest to her, didn't realize that she was living in an emotionally abusive relationship. As her sister, this is the hardest part, because as her sister, I witnessed the controlling and manipulative behavior of her husband. But like most people who know somebody who's been affected by domestic violence, we tend to be naive, and we tend to be afraid to step up and say anything to that loved one. I always assumed, and I knew in my heart that my sister was a strong, intelligent person, and I assumed that what she was doing was okay and she could handle herself in that situation. Unfortunately, that was probably the worst mistake that I've ever made in my life. And that's why we did this event today, so that those of you who might be in my situation, like I was 10 and a half years ago, who had a loved one in an abusive relationship but was just too scared to say something to that person, we're hoping to get you some strength so that you can say something. Tara's death was the result of the ultimate act of domestic violence, where she was murdered at the hands of her husband. Whether you're here today because you've had a personal experience with domestic violence, of which I've met some of you this morning, I even met somebody who was on the jury 10 and a half years ago. So whether you're here today because you've had a family member, yourself, a personal experience with domestic violence, or you're just here to support Turning Point's mission, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart on behalf of my family for being here today. My sister was one of the unlucky ones, but for those of you that have been in a domestic violence situation and have gotten out, my heart beats heavy for you guys. It really does. Tara's kids are my kids now. Lindsay, standing behind me, was first grade when it happened. She's 11th grade now, so that's pretty scary. And Ian was 4 years old and a freshman now in high school.
I just want to say thank you so much for coming out today and supporting us, because this means more to me and to my family than you will ever know. Because when Tara died, it was really, really hard. But this has brought so much strength to me and to my family. And it means absolutely so much. So thank you very much.
I just like to thank every single one of you guys here for coming, because this means so much. And it just helps the survivors and everybody else that's been involved with domestic violence and has survived it, and after that has thrived. And I just want everybody out there to know that domestic violence is a big deal, and even if you aren't directly affected by it, you are still affected by it and can still help other people. And I just want to thank everybody again for coming here. Thank you.
We're enjoying the teenage years, I guess, if you could say that. But, we're here today, obviously, because of what happened to my sister 10 and a half years ago. And I am just dumbfounded by the outpouring that we've had today. Over 500 people who signed up to come walk in support of domestic violence awareness. And it's pretty powerful.
I'm playing football right now, and I'm doing wrestling and track. So, doing a lot of stuff. Freshman this year, so it's going to be a whole new life pretty much. But I think what happened 10 and a half years ago will always affect me, and it'll always make me a better person because I know what's happened.
Currently swim team is the biggest thing right now. Battling a knee injury currently, but other than that, it's been pretty good. I'm also I'm running track in the spring, and then I rock climb during the winter. So. And my mom would be really, really proud of what's going on right now. think that she would not want her death to be unimportant. I mean, she would want people to understand that things like that do happen, and unfortunately, it sometimes takes one person to lose the biggest part of their life for other people to realize that it can become better. It won't always be hard.
I think people gravitate towards Tara's story because she was such a normal person, you know, upper middle class family, you know, a businesswoman, you know, having 2 young kids. You know, yeah, maybe her and Steve's roles were a little bit reversed, where he was more the stay-at-home and she was the breadwinner in the family. But I think that just the normalcy of their family, quote unquote, that I think that's what has really drawn people to Tara's story, that they can relate to it. You know, I think so often we have a misconception that horrible things only happen to the poor, the people who you know, are in bad neighborhoods. And that's just not the case with domestic violence. It doesn't know any boundaries. So I think that really is what drew people to Tara's story. They could see themselves possibly in that situation.
Grown up and sharing. Tonight, Tara Grant's children all grown up and sharing an important message with all of you, almost 15 years after their mother's brutal murder. The murder of Tara Grant sent shockwaves across the country. The young wife and mother of 2 was killed by her own husband in her Macomb County home.
Now, for the first time, Tara's children are sharing their story with the hope of helping others. Our Hank Winchester was out front and center covering this story, and you've kept in close contact with the family, Hank.
Yeah, Karen, I've talked with them a lot over the years, and I'll tell you what, it's so good to see how the kids are doing today. They're actually no longer kids. They're both college students. I'm so impressed with how both Lindsay and Ian have not only dealt with their past, but how they're using what they've learned to help other people all over this area.
When this tragedy first played out back in 2007, Tara Grant's children were just 4 and 6 years old. Their lives turned upside down in an instant. Their mother murdered by their own father. A custody battle got underway. It was Tara's sister Alicia and her husband Eric who not only gained custody, but the responsibility of working to help these fragile children deal with such a devastating loss.
I just want to say thank you that everyone comes out here every year.
Today, Tara's children, Ian and Lindsay, are back in Macomb County.
Being able to go and spread the word and make sure that somebody else doesn't have to ever go through stuff that like me or my sister or my mom or anybody else in my family's had to go through.
They return every year for the Tara Grant Run Walk, a chance to remember their mother and to help raise awareness about domestic abuse.
And if I can change that one person's life, that would just make all of this like totally worthwhile.
They're just miles away from their former home, the site of the murder. But in reality, mentally, they're miles away from that single moment. Their lives shaped by their past, yes, but more importantly, by the love and support they received over the years.
I will advocate therapy to anybody and everybody that I meet. And I don't think I would be the person that I am today unless I worked with psychologists that I did.
Lindsay is now almost 21, a student at Ohio State. Her focus on the future, but it's a reminder of her past.
So I'd kind of wanted to go into psychology for a while, and when I was picking like a field of psychology, because there's a lot, I was like, you know what, I'm going to work with kids because that was the most impactful time that I had working with a psychologist was when I was younger, after everything that happened with my mom. So.
Lindsay wants to help other children who've dealt with traumatic events in their own lives. She clearly understands the pain.
Do you even really have much of a memory of that time of your life?
So I do, and it's actually kind of interesting because I'll cross-reference almost what it feels like to be the patient on the flip side of it rather than being the actual psychologist. And so I'll look at it, I can see it from both perspectives, and I think that's why I would be really successful at it, is because I know what it feels like to be sitting on the opposite side of it.
How did they kind of help you navigate all of this, do you think?
They helped me find coping mechanisms and ways to channel how I was feeling. That's the reason I'm super into art now, is because I had a therapist who was like, you already like to draw, so draw how you're feeling. So, and I still do that to this day.
Do you have any desire at all to talk to Steven?
I've thought about it, but I don't think that I ever will need to. If I ever choose to do it, it'll be because I wanted to,
on your
not
terms.
because, yeah. For a long time, I felt like I needed to speak to him to have closure, but I think that I created closure for myself. You know, I recognize that everything happens for a reason, and I live by that every single day.
And so I don't need him for the closure that I got.
Ian, now a college freshman in Wisconsin.
When you come back here to town, though, is there an emotional part of it that's tough for you?
It kind of rehashes some stuff just about like when I was younger, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, I know that's like personally a little bit harder for myself, but at the same time, if I have to go through a little bit of pain just to help a little bit, like a lot of people out, I'm 1,000% willing to do that.
Do you have much of a memory of all of that?
I have like bits and pieces, but not like total memory, just because I was only 4 years old when it happened.
And have you had any contact at all with Stephen at all?
I have not.
No. Is that something you want?
Not particularly, just because I have a really good place with my family right now, and there's no point kind of contacting him just because he did what he did, and at that point it's just out of my life.
Both Lindsay and Ian have turned the tragedy in their own lives into an opportunity to help other people. This month, Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and unfortunately during the pandemic, cases of domestic violence dramatically on the rise.
I like to be able to spread the word to pretty much just like end domestic violence, because I've been through that situation and I'm just trying to make sure nobody else has to go through that again.
I think that the biggest issue that happens surrounding domestic violence is that people are afraid to leave. And so just knowing that no one's going to judge you, that everyone is going to be there for you to love and support you, and that you have help if you need it.
I'm just so glad that Lindsay and Ian, they were able to overcome the tragedy in their early lives, and although I know that they will never be able to forget their mother's murder, at least they turned the tragedy into an opportunity to help others. And this, in my opinion, is Tara's legacy. I'm so very proud of both Lindsay and Ian. I don't know, can I say that? Anyway, I feel that I'm really proud, but also I am quite sad that Tara didn't manage to see her children grow up, but I know that she's up there watching over them. Thank you guys so much for staying with me today. Please do let me know what do you think about this case in the comment section down below. For now, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!